This
I
conference
see.
will now be recorded.
Yeah, I see few folks joined here. Thanks for joining again. Yeah, myself, Hari Kishan. I have around 14 years experience. I am a technical, or you can call me as a solution architect, working on designing and proposing enterprise applications. So yeah, from past 2 years, I've been practicing AWS. I have done more than 6 or 7 deployments on for different customer premises. So this session, I'm trying to cover AWS IAM. Basically, the very important service one has to understand, or I would say the very first service one has to understand very well if you want to effectively manage your AWS account. So the reason I'm saying is whenever you say purchase a laptop or bring up any server, the very first thing you do is you protect your server, right? Basically, you create required users to uh, understand who has to access the server, and then you create roles, permissions, what uh, resources in the server a particular user can access. So similarly, on the AWS, IAM provides such functionality so that we access the all AWS resources in a controlled manner, so that we don't over pay the money, right? So basically, if you can protect your AWS resources which are under your account, there can be in unauthorized access. People may misuse your account to provision their services, and which will result a lot of money you have to pay to the Amazon, right? So that's the reason IAM is very important web service, which everyone has to understand to protect the AWS resources under the account we create, and also it will help us to effectively manage AWS resources and how you deploy your AWS solution in Amazon. So having a detailed understanding about this IAM service is very important. So I'm not sure how many of you have created the AWS account already, but when you initially sign up, there will be an account. You will be providing your email address and a password to get that AWS account signed up. So that is also related to IAM, which I will cover in the later part. But I hope you have already have the AWS account, so that maybe after the session you will be able to log in and play some of those IAM functionalities which we will cover in this session. Right. Having said that, as I told, I'm a technical or a solution architect, but I am not a IT administrator or a security expert. But what I will do in this session is I will try to, the terminology and some of the concepts we will be talking about in this session will be mostly on security and IT administration. So, but the aspect I will be covering in this session is primarily related to AWS perspective, how those entities like users, groups, policies, how those things will be associated with the AWS IAM. And at least that will set you guys a platform. You can go on your own and explore different things if you want to do. Like example, if you want to federate your existing user database into IAM, integrate with IAM to access any AWS resource like say S3 bucket, you can do that. So I will slightly touch on those topics, so that based on your own requirement, you can explore it further. But yeah, in case we need any detailed discussion or something, we can always discuss those things in the group as well, right? So in this session, primarily I will be covering these topics. I will slightly talk about what is IAM, and then I will cover some of the terms commonly used in the IAM or discussed in the IAM, so that you can talk with other AWS experts. These terms, when you hear these terms, you understand what these things are, right? Then user types, then what are other identities we have. Then I will slightly talk about policies, what is policy and how it looks like, so that you can understand a policy next time when you see log into an AWS console and see any policy, you understand what it policy talks about, right? Then I will talk about how IAM works, then federating with existing users and the use case. I will also, throughout the session, I will be switching back and forth to the AWS console so that I can show you what I'm talking about, right? So, like I said, IAM is a web service basically provided by Amazon, which will help you to secure your AWS resources. When I say AWS resources, it could be a S3, which is a storage service, like different services we have covered in the last session, right? Compute service or a security service or a storage service. Any such services needs to be protected. So this IAM web service will allow you to protect all your AWS resources. And also it will provide you great control how you want to share your services to other users, any or other entities, another AWS account or another organization. So all such things you can do with IAM. So this is very important service, but I would say very simple to use it, but very important to understand. Right? Basically, it will provide, like any other security solution, it will help you to authenticate and authorize. So basically, authentication is something where you can get into the system, or it's like when you go into your friend's room or another house. When you enter into the main door, I would say that is called an authentication, but not we can't run into every room, right? So that is where the authorization comes into play picture, right? So whether you can walk into the bedroom or whether you can walk into the kitchen, where you have that, depending on the relation you have with that house, so you can get into that particular area. So that is where called authorization I would compare it with. So it will help. IAM will be helping you to create users and assign policies so that we can achieve this authentication and authorization. Like I mentioned earlier, whenever you sign up with your AWS account, you will be providing your email address and password. So which means there will be a user account will be created using IAM, which has a complete access. I mean, once you log in with the account into that AWS, into your AWS account, all the resources which you see here, when I say all the resources, this is how your resources look like. You see, these are all the services, right? Every service in the AWS is a resource. Like EC2 is a resource where you can spin up your virtual machines, or S3. S3 is another resource where you can create buckets in AWS where you can store your files. RDS is another resource where you can create your Oracle database or Microsoft SQL database or a DynamoDB. So these are everything is a resource in AWS. So whenever you create your first account, that is I would say root account, so that it has access to each and every service or resource available in AWS. But the recommended guidelines are you should never use your root account to manage your AWS account. As soon as you have signed up, better I recommend you to create one more user where you can provide access, which is actually required. Only a limited set of access you have to provide, so that your account is always secure, right? So that I will cover, or I will show you what I did with my account so that you will get an idea. But like I mentioned, it is you compare with your PC as well, right? It is always not recommended to log in as a root into your server or a VM, so that because you may accidentally delete any files, or you can do some unauthorized access to some other people, which is not, you're not supposed to do it. Rather, you are recommended to log in with a dedicated user, which has permissions to perform only few setup tasks, like say running a web server or running a database server where you have access. You can only do that, but you will not be able to open a firewall port or anything like that. So it is the same concept in the AWS as well. So it is always not recommended to log into the AWS management console with the root account. Rather, you have a dedicated users created it. So let's say you have a finance department or a storage management user. So you create a user and assign S3 resource to that user so that he can manage any S3 kind of a service. You can create buckets and he can store files into that S3, but he cannot do anything like creating a EC2 instance or something like that. So that is what it is recommended. I mean, this is very useful. Like say the account is managed by a corporate entity where the security guidelines are very strict, where you should not be providing full access to every individual in the organization. So that is where people create different users and assign only applicable services to those particular users, right? So that is where IAM comes into picture and plays very important role, right? So any questions here? Right.
Oh, Hari.
So yeah, go ahead. Okay. All right. So let me move on to the next slide, where I will try to cover some of the terminologies or terms which will be used. It is very general terms where you may be noticed or come across these terms already in your day-to-day work, but I will try to again cover those terminologies so that when we talk about these things, it will help us. So the very first term is a principal. Principal is nothing but a person or an application which tries to access your AWS resources, right? So whenever any access request comes into AWS, it will have a principal. That means that will have an associated which person or an application is requesting this access. So that kind of things will be available. So that is called a principal. I'm sorry. Then we have a request. This is could be a access request or an action request. Basically, it will ask you to request for an access, which will have action or an operation. Action could be like creating a user or deleting a bucket, S3 bucket, which will cover maybe in the some other sections in the future. But S3 will have buckets, where bucket you can think like a directory where you will place your files, right? So all those things will come under either action or operation. Then we have resources. This resource is nothing but AWS resources. It could be a EC2 or S3 or RDS server or something like that. Then the request will also have principal, which user or which particular entity is requesting this access. Then we have some environment data, like some more details about the requester. Then we have resource data as well. Okay, so moving on to the next, then like I mentioned, action could be anything related to a particular AWS service. Like when we are talking about S3, S3 is a service, right? So in the S3, it will have a list of actions permitted. Like I mentioned, in S3, we can create users or we can delete users, we can create groups or rules or policies. Everything will be in action. So whatever we are doing now through, say, through AWS Management Console, or you can do it through programmatically. So that will have to have these actions included in it. Right, then we have resources. Resources, like I mentioned, it could be any resource what you're seeing under applications and the management console, which I displayed here. So everything what you're seeing in the screen here are under resources. You can take them as a resource here. So yeah, so next time whenever somebody talks about resource in terms of IAM, so you can think of it as a S3 bucket or a EC2 instance or anything like that. Right? So going to the next, there will be different user types available in sorry. Yeah, so there will be different types of users available in IAM. The first one is the first time access users, which I covered already. When you create your AWS account for the very first time, you're going to get that root user, which will have unlimited permissions. You can do anything with that. And also that is the account which you'll be generally using to create other users using IAM service. So that is where the next type of user, IAM users. This is the IAM users which you will be adding using from AWS Management Console, which I will show you later in this session. So these users will be more like focused users, will have any limited set of permissions, limited set of resources they can manage. So this is another kind of users which we can create from IAM. And then we have federating existing users. Like say when we are managing a small AWS account with only say 10 users, it will be very easy to create those 10 users using AWS Management Console. But think about an organization where you have like say 2,000 employees or more, where you have to have all those 2,000 employees should have access to AWS resources. That time we can't recreate all those users into the IAM service. So what we can do is we can integrate those LDAP. Typically your organization will have an LDAP server which will have this user information. So we can integrate those LDAP system into the IAM service so that those users need not to have their credentials duplicated in the Amazon AWS account as well. So yeah, we can have these three different types of users which we can have, and these users will primarily be accessing or managing AWS resources, rest of AWS resources we have in AWS. Then we have IAM identities, where we call it as IAM users. Typically, like any user management application, we have users, then we have groups. A group is nothing but, so we have a concept of groups also in the IAM. So group is nothing but a group of, we will have a set of users will be assigned to that group. Like say in an organization, you can have a finance group, you can have HR group, you can have a development group or a QA group or IT group. So you can have a different set of groups, and you can create users and assign all those users belongs to that any particular group, so that you can assign the roles, which is the next term, which in the identities. So basically you can create a role like a finance role or a HR role, and then you can associate list of permissions to that role, and you can assign that role to a particular group or a user. So this is how any typical user management application or software will be having. So the same concepts we have in AWS as well. So we have IAM users, we have groups and roles, and then policies, which I will also cover in the later. But we also can have a temporary credentials. Temporary credentials are useful particularly when you create like a federated access or something when you don't have your when you don't have your users created in IAM, but they will be logged in user using a federated user integration, then they will have to assume particular roles, and that we can assess that role will have to have a temporary credentials created for accessing, say, for 1 hour or say 30 minutes. So for that time, IAM internally creates a temporary credentials to access those resources, and they will be expired after a given a TTL. So we have a concept of temporary credentials that will be used primarily with the roles and used with whenever we do integrate with some organization entities. Okay, so the core of the IAM functionality is dependent on the policies. Basically, a policy is a document uh, in a JSON format, like a JavaScript object notation format, which will tell which user, which resource and action, what can we do with that resource. All such details will be defined in the policies, IAM policy. So it's a JSON format, basically, which will explain the permissions to be accessed, used by users or groups or any particular roles. So the policies can be of different types. Basically, it could be you can define policies like identity-based policies. Basically, like say you create a user John and you can have policies defined specifically for John, or you can have a resource-based policies. Basically, you can say S3 bucket. So who can access this bucket and say read policies, read access or write access or bucket creation access. So resource-based policies also you can create like S3 related policy or EC2 related policy or a database related policy. So resource-based policies you can create. Then you can also define boundaries with the policies, like say in a day, a particular user can make only 1,000 requests to my S3 buckets. You can define such rules into your policies, and also you can have org-based policies. And then access control list is primarily you will be using when it comes to you define your virtual private cloud, that is a VPC, that requires like 2 to 3 sessions, I would say. But when we cover that time, I will talk more about this access control list. But for now, you can understand a policy is basically which will talk about the permissions to your AWS resources and how you assign those permissions to users or roles or groups. Okay. So, like I mentioned, this is how the policy looks like. Policy looks like this is a JSON format where you see effect and action. Action, you can see that S3 is the resource. In that S3, there are operations called a list bucket. That is how the action is. And resource is nothing but any resource you can define. This particular resource can access S3 bucket, and you can use action called list bucket. Okay. Similarly, you can see there are 3 actions defined in the same policy. You can say allow or deny. You can put deny also, say whenever this particular user or resource comes for S3 bucket, you can deny them. Or similarly, you can define a very fine granular details about S3 usage. You can say you can put an object. Put an object means you can actually create a file inside S3 bucket, or you can get a particular file from the S3 bucket, or you can delete it. So such kind of permissions also you can define using policies. So let me show you the IAM to show you the different policies we have. whenever you see you have your AWS console, by default, you will have a lot of predefined policies available in your account. And also you note that IAM is a global service. Like you see, in the last session I covered, we have lot of regions available, and there are not all services available for every region. So, but when it comes to IAM, it does not belong to any particular region. So whatever the users or groups or roles policies you define under IAM are applicable for every region, right? So that's why whenever you navigate to, say, let me navigate to the S3 service, then S3 is also global, by the way. So, but let me navigate to the, say, CloudWatch. So now you can see that automatically the region is changed to my default region. So like I mentioned, whenever you create your AWS account, by default, you will have a region assigned to your account, but you are free to change that region to any other region you're looking for. But when I navigate back to IAM, you will see that region is automatically changed to global, and it will not allow you to select any particular region here. That is only because IAM belongs to global, not belongs to any particular region, right? And you see the policies. By default, there are so many policies are available. Let me search for a policy related to S3 bucket. Say you can see Amazon S3 full access. Let me open that. So you see that the policy is written in JSON format. You see effect is allow and action is S3, and star. Star means you can do anything with S3 related service. And resource means you can everybody can do everything. So whenever you create a user and assign this particular policy to that particular user, and so that particular user can do anything with the S3 because we have assigned S3 full access to that particular user. Similarly, you see there is S3 read-only access, and there are other access related to S3. So what you can do is, whenever you want to explore more about the policies, try to log into your account and click on the policies here, and try to understand how the existing policies are defined, so that, excuse me, you can define your own policies here. Okay. So yeah, before I go further, any questions here, so that I can go back and cover any terms you're not able to understand or catch up?
Hari, this is Ratish. Hari.
Yeah.
Yeah, you said you can create roles and assign those roles to groups. Okay, and users are part of those groups, right? Can you explain, like, what is the role that is being created, how it is get assigned to user groups, how user get access to those user groups? That is one. Number two is, you also said, right, you can integrate LDAP authentication to IAM service, IAM resource, right?
Right.
How do you integrate that, LDAP to IAM? For example, you create a user group called as ABC in AWS, and the same thing you'll be creating in LDAP. So how do you going to integrate these two so that the user get access to in the organization, right? If you get access to that particular user group, by default he should also get access to AWS. So how you are going to integrate that?
Yeah, sure.
Uh,
I will
do
I will I will definitely cover about that. Yeah, you have some more?
you got this right, Hari? Like,
Yeah, I will talk about it. In fact, in my presentation also I have a diagram which talks about how that flow is, and also I will cover that what you're talking about here. So I go to the roles, the very first question you're asking about.
mhm.
So whenever you create a role, right, there are four ways to create a role. Basically, that role, I mean, which particular service uses that role, right?
Oh,
So
okay.
it could be
Okay.
a internal AWS resource itself, or it could be another AWS account which will use your role. So you will create a role in your AWS account, and you will have that role assigned to another AWS account, say your friend or a third party or another organization. They have another AWS account, so they will try to use some of the resources defined in your account with this particular role, right? That is another way to do it. Or
Okay.
there could be another way to do it is web identity, where you have Facebook users or Google users, or Amazon Cognito is another web identity authentication provider, where you can also have your account created here so that you can use that for accessing any particular AWS resources, right? Or you can use with login with the Amazon itself. And also,
Okay.
like LDAP, you are talking about your question, where you can use SAML-based federation integration, where uh, your organization LDAP we will have to provide using integration like this. But I will, if required, we can do some another session where we can integrate with a small LDAP. But like that, covering that requires more than an hour, where we will have to talk about the LDAP we have. Then we have to show that users are already available. Then we can define that. But yeah, if you are interested, and I see more interest on that, we can have a working session where we can integrate with in LDAP existing LDAP users with this particular thing. But yeah, role is particularly helpful for this kind of requirements, where you don't have to create a user or a user in account, but let them come from external world from their account, and let them assume this role so that we can assign all the access to that particular role. Did I answer your question?
Yeah. Yes, Hari. Thanks a lot, Hari.
Yeah, thanks. All right. Any more questions we have before I move with my next slide? All right. So yeah, so this is how all the things we talked about, the terminologies and the concepts or entities we talked about now sits in the AWS. Basically, you have your accounts uh, sitting, which you can see on the right side, where external users or AWS users will be trying to access your AWS resources. Basically, they will be accessing your AWS resources to perform one or the other actions or an operations. For that, AWS will have internally a lot of policies defined. That is where the second box talks about authorization, where you will have all the policies which I showed in my previous slide. So the policies will be like identity-based policies or resource-based policies. So these are all called rules, which will be used to determine whether we give access to that particular user to perform a particular action or an operation. And then we have principals, like you can see here, federated users you have, or within your IAM service itself, you can have your own users. Then we have roles defined in it. Then we have requests. Basically, the accounts or external users will be making those requests to perform these actions. So this is how the overall thing looks like. You see your resources, all your whatever resources or applications you see, everything is a resource in AWS. So like we have a concept in Linux operating system, right? Everything is a file. Even a service or any application is a file. Similarly, in AWS world, everything you see, every service or application is a resource. So you can request or define permissions to your roles. Okay, any question on this in this diagram? But yeah, this diagram will help you to understand how everything are organized. Your principals or users or roles, and group is a virtual thing. Basically, you will have your group with a list of users, right? And then we have very specific request. Specific request will talk about the operation which it wants to do and which resource it has to operate with, right? And then some context related information it will have, right? And then we were talking about federating with the existing users. This is particularly useful that when in case where you don't want to duplicate your user information and password information into the AWS, that time you can have that integration you can perform based on that. What it does is whenever you integrate your organization database, user database with AWS account, so whenever any such user try to mm, access the AWS resources, IAM comes into picture. Basically, IAM will try to ask that user to authenticate within the organization database, and that organization database will authenticate that particular user and responds with a particular token that is called access token. Then what IAM does is IAM based on the token, it will find out that corresponding role to be assigned with that particular request. That role will be assigned to that particular request, so that that role will have all the request permissions. So once that role is assigned to that particular access request token, so the user can perform any operations with the AWS resources. And then once that operation is done, that obviously that automatically the token will expire, and he will not be any further or subsequent requests he has to do with that. He has to repeat that same process. So in this model, basically we are not duplicating the user information, but still we will be able to access the AWS resources. Okay, and one more thing I want to mention, all the content what you see in my presentation, basically I have not hand typed anything, but mostly I try to put these things together so that you have a systematic way of learning the IAM. But yeah, you can get the same information in the AWS console tutorials as well. But I thought putting like this will help you to go take every slide, and you want to learn more about this, you can go to that particular site, and you see there are text in the blue which will have further links. You can learn more about that. But this will only help you to say a systematic approach, I would say. Right. So this is about the topics I wanted to cover with the time we have. Like I thought I will have first 45 minutes. I will talk about the things, and also I will walk you through some management consoles where I will talk about the users, groups, and roles now. Then I will see if we have some more time to take some more questions. Right. So I'm not sure how many of you have created your AWS account yet, but whenever you see your AWS account, you will have all these tick marks, what you see green tick marks here in a warning mode, which will say you recommend you to activate your MFA. MFA is nothing but multi-factor authentication. Like whenever you perform any banking transaction, you get your OTP to your mobile. Sorry, to further proceed with your transaction. So similarly, to protect your AWS account and unauthorized access to your AWS resources, it is recommended to activate MFA. So you can actually MFA you can do with many ways. Basically, you can have a virtual MFA. You can have a Google Authenticator installed in your mobile, so that will act as a device, virtual device, where you will receiving codes like a six digit code. You will receive it, which you have to enter whenever you log into your AWS Management Console. So I did one in my mobile so that I can protect my account. Basically, say if somebody knows my password also, they will not be able to log into my account. So I recommend you also activate that. It is very simple. Basically, you go to your Google Play Store where you download Google Authenticator, and then you have to capture a scan barcode from your mobile so that your account will be linked to your Google Authenticator. So it will keep on sending the security codes whenever you want to log in. You have to enter that particular security code to log into your account. Then we also talked about having or recommended not to use the root account to manage your AWS resources. So that's the reason you have to create specific users to manage your AWS account. So I have created my own new users to log in, so that I will not be using my root account to log into my AWS Management Console. And then we have groups to assign permissions. You can, like I said, if the account is related to your business or an organization, we should have always segregated permissions groups so that we don't have all permissions to every individual user. And then also we see that password policies, we can have strict guidelines to define your password policies, and you can have recommend your users to change their password frequently, and we can put very strict rules. What you see here, we can do that. So I recommend first time when you log in, you have all these things in a warning mode. You can have them fixed so that you can manage them. Your AWS account is protected, right? And one more thing I wanted to talk about when it comes to that AWS resources. Basically, you can access. Let me create a new user so that you understand what I'm talking about. So I am creating a test user here, right? So AWS asks about this question, right? Basically, it asks whether this user will be using the AWS user resources programmatically or through AWS Management Console. So programmatically means you can have there will be AWS SDKs there where you can program. I mean, you can access your S3 bucket, or you can uh, start your EC2 instance using programmatically. So in that time, you can use this particular user, which will generate access key ID and a secret access key to programmatically get the permission to manage or access those resources, or you can access through AWS Management Console. So AWS Management Console is nothing but, so whenever I create my user, this user, if I check in this one, he will be able to log into the AWS Management Console, right? So that is one thing. So in this case, I am asking this particular user will have access to AWS Management Console. Then I can have permissions. We can add all the permissions what we have. We attach, so this particular user can access different administrator access we can create, or we can create this user can only manage EC2 instance, or you can manage only S3 buckets. So we can do all such policies can be attached to this user. Then, like I said, we can also attach some additional things, additional permissions also to the user. And when it comes to here, if you want to attach the user, the newly created user to the any existing groups, you can do that as well. Then tagging is something, a feature is available across all the AWS resources we have in AWS. So basically, this will help you to tag the resources. So let's say, good example is like say department. You can say this user belongs to say HR department. So you can do like tag like that any user or any other resources in the AWS so that we can filter all the resources we created so far in your account based on the tagging, right? So this will give you the review what all we have selected options for this user, then we can create that user, right? So once we create that user, you can download the credentials the that were provided, and also that will have two sets of credentials. One is GUI access, and also if you have selected that particular user, let me go back. So if you have selected a programmatic access, that time it will give another set of details, which is called access key ID and secret access key, which you will provide in your programs or self scripts or any other APIs you will be trying to access. So it will have this credential CSV will have those details with you, so you can keep them for future usage. So this is how you create users here, which I created now. So now I see my new user available here. Like we also covered role, how we can create role. There are ways to, what is this particular role about? Who will be using this role? We can define that. Similarly, let me go back to the policies. We can create our own policies, but most of the time you can see there are 500 policies available already predefined. So most of the time, the permissions, the kind of permissions you are looking to assign will be available with the existing policies itself, but you will have to find out them. But there are situations where you don't find them. That time you can also create your own policy. You can create your own policy, and you can give the format, what the JSON format, where you can list down the resources and actions that can be permitted, and you can create that your own policy as well. But yeah, I will not be creating anything, but yeah, let me know, like if you want to do more detailed things on the policies, we can have a dedicated session on that. But there is a lot of tutorial available on the Amazon itself. It will help you to create the policy. Let me go back to the IAM. And so we covered users. Groups are nothing but a group where you can, I will say, a test group. You can have attach your policies also into the group. So once group is assigned, we can add users to the group. Like I have my test user created. So now I have my group created, and I have attached some permissions to the group. Then I have assigned some users to the group. So this is how you can manage groups in the AWS, right? And one more thing I want to cover before the session ends is about billing. So basically you can create alerts in the billing itself, where say you create a user and you want to be notified whenever the billing for that particular account goes beyond say $10. You can do such alerts as well, right? You have to go to billing preferences here, and you say receive billing alerts, you have to check this mark and just save this preference. Then you go to say CloudWatch, go to So one more thing you need to understand is in the CloudWatch for supporting the billing alerts. Ohio, this particular region doesn't support the notification. So US, Virginia, North Virginia, this particular region supports that alert. So it is asking me to change that region to that. So I have created my billing alert here, right? Let me. So I have a billing notification created here. So you can see that alarm. I have created an alarm so that it will send me a notification whenever there is a my charges cross $5. But I have not yet verified my email address, so it is giving me a pending confirmation thing here. So you can also set your billing alarms here. Okay, so any more questions? We have 5 minutes.
Hari, this is Ratish Hari. Let's assume that you have 10 user groups that has been created and the users are assigned to those 10 user groups. How you are going to identify, how you are going to differentiate which user belongs to specific user groups? How you are going to differentiate? How you are going to identify that?
Okay, so your question is, I have, let me go back to IAM. So you have 10 users here, right?
Yeah, 10 users. Let's say 10 user groups. 10 user groups. Assume that.
Okay, so you have 10 user groups. Okay, I have two here. Okay,
Yeah. Assume that we have two user groups, and
right,
users are assigned to those user groups. Correct?
correct.
Let's say there are 100 users. 100 users are
Okay,
assigned to these two user groups. So how
okay.
you're going to differentiate, how you're going to identify which user belongs to which user group?
So yeah, so you can do that by simply clicking that group and go to that users tab. So I click the group here and I click the users tab. You will have that list of users listed here.
Oh, okay,
That is
okay,
one
yeah.
way. Yeah, that is listed here. That is one way. And also, like I covered, right, when you create any resource like user or a group or a policy role here in AWS, you can also tag them. You can create tags so that you can filter based on the tags also you can filter the users. Like say all the users, you give a common tag like a department equals to HR, so you can filter them based on the tag names as well.
Okay. So what is this access advisor, Hari?
Yeah, so I mean AWS, we have to be very cautious using all this. Basically, it will, mm, I mean, everything they charge, right? So it will basically help you to define the group in an efficient manner. Basically, it will help you to what kind of access this particular group wants to do. Like say HR group is there. So for HR group, you want to provide say RDS access or any particular access to that. So it will help you to define your group and access effectively. But never know, they may make it as a paid service also. Basically, it will help you to define your access
Oh,
uh,
okay.
for users and groups, all the stuff. Otherwise, you have to handwrite here, right? You are trying to say, let's say if you don't have this, basically you have to go to that policies and you have to search a particular policy here, right? Say S3 related, I have to search all the policies and assign to that. But rather, this one help you to define the access to that groups in a quick manner. It's a kind of a tool which will help you to define your access faster.
Okay. Yeah.
Any other question? And yeah, I mean, the next session or the further sessions, mostly we will be spending time in the AWS console, where probably I will talk about EC2 instance, where I will define an EC2 instance, something like this. Mostly it will be more hands-on session. So I recommend, if any of these guys already have not created their AWS account, you can create them so that we will have some really hands-on sessions going forward. Any more questions?
I'm good, Hari.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Thank you very much for your time in a long weekend. So yeah, even I also had this long weekend, but my weekend starts from tomorrow. Hopefully, you guys have good time, two
Yeah.
Thanks,
holidays.
Hari.
Thank
Yeah.
you very
Thanks
much.
a lot, Hari. Thanks a lot for your time.
Have a nice day.
Thank you. Bye.
Thanks, Hari. Have a good long weekend. Bye.
Thank you. Same to you.